I'm a very anxious person, so sometimes my anxiety doesn't let me work.
When I first went remote, the first few months were awesome. After that, decline for sure.
If there's no one around in the apartment, I'm basically here alone, talking to my screen.
It's just very, very tough if you're not mentally prepared to handle remote work.
Understanding around mental health issues is the number one challenge, at least in my personal experience, unless you struggle from it. And you know firsthand what it feels like. Very, very difficult to understand what someone's going through.
Mental health of remote workers is a double-edged sword, a topic in which we have to be very, very careful to not say it's wonderful or it's terrible, because it's both.
I think remote work can impact mental health in a way that's super beneficial. I think it can also impact you in a way that is really shitty at the same time.
Personally, I haven't missed a beat mentally. It's more of now I do like to be in my own head. I am more of an introvert than most people think, even though I am out on social media and stuff, but where I gain my energy, where I kind of feel the most comfortable is when I have my own thoughts and thinking through things, or just talking with somebody who's really close to me. That's where I get most of my energy from. So mentally, the mental side, I feel like I've gotten stronger. I've gotten to be able to think through things a little bit more. There's less noise.
Being in a new city, working remotely for the first time, not really knowing how I was going to adapt to remote work, were all huge issues for me when I first started out that I didn't even plan for.
I had a lot of imposter syndrome, and I had a lot of I can do this on my own, I don't need to ask questions, and that really a degradation for me. It was Juliana's taking a really long time on tickets, she's not saying anything, and so I had to go through that process with my manager of hey, there's something wrong.
I suffer of imposter syndrome, and randomly every now and then it just pops in. When I was not being efficient, when I was not working the hours that I had to work, it's just something that it would just pull me down.
I think a very large part of burnout in remote workers is linked to additional cognitive load that a remote worker experiences compared to working in a company, where that can exacerbate imposter syndrome. The gremlins can start talking much, much harder, faster, and stronger, because feedback, it happens implicitly. It's via osmosis, right? You'll hear people talk about things, and it's much easier to be told, you've done a great job on this thing. And if you don't get these feedback, particularly if you are in a position of leadership in an organization, very, very quickly you can have a lot of mental load on yourself and doubt and imposter syndrome around, am I doing the right thing? And that is incredibly draining.
I think personal human connection is important for our mental health. And, we can try and recreate some of that virtually, but it's at the moment, where we haven't fully adapted, it's a poor substitute for, actual, physical, human connection. Again, I think there are great benefits. I think that our interactions will change and grow more diverse because of these virtual interactions. Again, it has been hard for me, personally, from a mental perspective, from a mental health perspective. Things like depression, anxiety. Not only were you sort of at a remove from everyone, we're not given naturally those tools that we all use to kind of handle change and handle these shifts.
I have found that through the acceptance of my team and my manager, I have found acceptance for my own anxiety. They accepted it before I did, that some days I just don't get that much done. And it's not because I don't want to, and it's not because I purposefully spent the day wasting away. It's because I have very bad anxiety, and sometimes that just doesn't work with work.
What I've seen with remote work is that it enables people who have difficulties with anxiety, with depression, with other conditions, to actually feel like they can work a very solid career. There's something really wonderful about that, because I think there's probably a lot of businesses that have missed out on a lot of incredible talent because there is just a single limitation that's stopping that person from being there, whether it's physical or emotional.
So we have to be very careful that we are creating very strict boundaries and very, very empathetic support systems around remote workers to help them react in a healthy way to the change of remote work. So we're keeping them connected with their coworkers. We're encouraging them to build relationships in their communities so that they can help prevent isolation for themselves. We are creating boundaries around how much or how little they should be working to help prevent burnout, and helping them understand how to create pre-work routines and post-work routines that help them get in and out of work mode and set those psychological boundaries for themselves. When those are in place, we see incredible results, that people take less mental health days because they're working in an environment in which they feel valued, they feel safe. They don't need to go into a high pressure social environment so much and be judged. They can just work. They don't feel as much external judgment for the way that they look. There's less discrimination for minorities about your height, your gender, your race, your sexual orientation, the clothes that you wear. They just live and work in a safer environment.
I'm a social creature. I love interacting with my friends, but I'm an introvert, and I recharge my energy by with solitude, by reading, being by myself, like being away from people.
For me, at some point, there was quite a challenge because I like having people around me and I get energy from that.
Find people to support you and be transparent, let yourself, once you have that good environment, let yourself be vulnerable.
When you're working remotely, you need to be pretty comfortable being vulnerable.